Hello and welcome to the circus. Hello and welcome back to Monday Mayhem. This is the reaction show for week 15 of fantasy football. As always, we're going to start right away with what did I get wrong?
Know your limits, Master Wayne.
That man has no limits.
Well, you do, sir.
Well, can't afford to know him.
And what's going to happen on the day that you find out?
We all know how much you like to say, I told you so.
On that day, Master Wayne, even I won't want to. Proper.
Man, this week it felt like fucking everything. Just like literally whatever takes you wanted to have. This was ass backwards land for fantasy football. But I think right off the bat, Gabe Davis got me again. That fucking guy. I think, you were shooting for upside because you had games that had already played. And obviously there were people that were down big. Couple teams, I benched Gabe because I was like, I'm playing floor plays here and I'm already up big. Couple teams, I was down big and I was like, fuck, gotta put in Gabe Davis and pray for the flip side of the 20-point game. Sometimes he does it, sometimes he gooses. Now he's goosed back-to-back weeks. Officially, you cannot trust this man ever again. The other big one for me has been Jerome Ford. I've been like a Jerome Ford truther. I was trading for him in a lot of places. I thought the schedule was about to really lighten up for him with Chicago and now coming up Houston and the Jets. And suddenly only one of those matchups, being the fucking lowly Jets, is like the one that really is seemingly a good matchup still to come. Houston obviously decimated the Yeti, which is next on the list. Derrick Henry, I've been a huge proponent of all year. He was averaging 2 fucking touchdowns a game until suddenly you have Derrick Henry not fucking showing up for the fantasy playoffs against Houston. He always smashes against Houston. He's playing Houston. He's got the fucking powder blues on, and this man ran for less than fucking 10 yards. I cannot believe what is going on. And I mean, there's lots of farts to come later in the hearts and farts section. But my God, Derrick Henry really let me down in a big spot yesterday. Shout out to, I think his name's Christian in the Fantasy Football Advice Forum chats. He ended up going with his gut and starting Rachaad White. In spite of what I had said, he had asked Derrick Henry or Rachaad White. He went with his gut. And I always say, whatever I say and whatever logic and process that I'm using based on experience, always go with your fucking gut. Always go with what you really think is going to happen at the end of the day. We're here to mourn together. I think the other one for me, on a season-long basis, he continues to be a thorn in my side. Najee Harris is awful. I can't deal with fucking Najee Harris anymore. It's tearing my soul to pieces. So I'll focus more on Pat Freiermuth, who has only had 3 receptions in the last 3 games after going for 9 for 120. I thought Pat Freiermuth, given the landscape of tight ends, had the potential to maybe push for an all-pro season. Not even fucking close. Didn't even sniff it. I mean, he had that one game where he went 9 for 120 and kind of showed the potential. And if he'd been able to maintain something along those lines for the entire season, even if it had just been for PPR, then maybe that would be something to point to. But good fucking Lord, the Pittsburgh Steelers offense. And now they're turning to Mason Rudolph just in time for Christmas. So I'm sure he'll be on the fart list next week. The only other big one for me was Jalen Waddle. I was concerned about the matchup. I was still playing him, obviously, given just the dichotomy of what was going on in fantasy football. But on the Sunday Live, someone had asked Jaden Reed or Jalen Waddle, and I ended up going with Jayden Reed. That's the kind of move where, again, it's going against natural fantasy advice of don't get cute, start your studs. Now, Jayden Reed still had a good game. He had a tutty. He did end up getting nicked up, so just maybe monitor that. And we'll talk about that a little bit later in the early waiver section. But obviously, Jalen Waddle was the number one wide receiver on the week, despite the matchup, despite the fact that Tyreek Hill was out and they were going to be focusing on him. The only thing they focused on was watching him fucking go for like 170 and a tutty. So it was just real bad for any Jalen Waddle faders yesterday. Sorry, losing my brain here. It's been such a fucking bad week. Speaking of bad weeks, there were still some things that I got right.
I thought my jokes were bad.
So, I mean, right off the bat, my last week's top recommended waiver claims, Ty Chandler for the running back position, smashed, and Raiders defense. I really was adamant that Raiders defense should be started. And if you started Raiders defense and were able to coast on that huge game through the week, that felt really good. Even though it wasn't in the playoffs, I actually had Raiders defense and Zamir White going in an all-important matchup because in my main league that I run, if you get to Toilet Bowl, the loser of Toilet Bowl is banished for 1 year. You are exiled from the league, and we replace you. It's full redraft, so there's no worries about like the teams and everything. But it's to kind of keep it churning with the managers, kind of keep it fresh every year, and also really put some juice into the Toilet Bowl so that there actually is a massive punishment that's worth fighting for through the entire year. So luckily, my opponent had a lot of people that were on the fart list. They all shit the bed, and I got very lucky, and I was able to coast thanks to Raiders defense. So hopefully you were too. The other one, ironically enough, because it keeps getting thrown back in my face for some reason, just the nature of Twitter, I guess. I had commented like 3 months ago on a post by Mason Dodd, who's like a huge name in the fantasy world. And in my mind, like it's for fantasy football, I'm assuming, because it's Mason posting it. And I lamented and I did not agree with, especially from a fantasy football perspective, but even technically from a real life perspective, and I changed my mind, but I didn't agree with the drafting of Jahmyr Gibbs, the moving on of Jamal Williams, and taking David Montgomery. It felt like a very sideways move. From Hawkinson to Laporta, I could understand because of salary reasons and age reasons and attrition and all those things. But the running backs, I was like, it feels like you're paying more now for David Montgomery than for Jamal Williams, and he's been only marginally better. Whereas I think Jahmyr Gibbs is the one I understand he's electric. The issue when you were looking back before he had played was always going to be usage and then potential risk for injury because he is on the smaller side. Now, it's worked out that Jahmyr Gibbs has been an excellent running back, and I course corrected like months ago that this was, if you watch the show in any consistent form, which I'm guessing probably not. I've only been doing this 6 months. But hey, if you've been with me for this whole ride, you would already know that I've course corrected and admitted that Jahmyr Gibbs is a potentially electric fantasy player, and he was definitely a trade candidate for us. And I even made a big trade for him in my home league, sending James Cook and Chris Olave to get back Christian Kirk and Jahmyr Gibbs because I believed that thoroughly in him. And so James Cook also had a great week. But obviously Jahmyr Gibbs had an excellent week as well. And I mean, all of the Lions smashed. They were like one of the only teams that you were really happy about. Sam Laporta, speaking of the Lions, one of my most drafted tight ends, basically everywhere that I was reaching on like a Mark Andrews, in the rare cases that I was still taking Travis Kelce, or if I was just reaching high on a tight end, I was usually covering myself in the back end by taking Laporta as like a late rookie flyer so that I could kind of, mitigate my exposures. and potentially have a backup just in case things didn't work out for Mandrews or Kelsey. Like maybe Kelsey finally hits the age wall. Mandrews unfortunately did end up getting injured. So all of those things play into it. My best ball exposures were like above 50% on Sam Laporte. I was a huge believer in him. So that's, obviously been one of my biggest hits of the year. Rashee Rice is a guy. I picked him over Lockett, who I thought was potentially a safe floor play. But I said, if you need the upside, go with Rashee Rice. That was again on the Sunday Live. Now, the other one I picked over was Amari Cooper. So I'm glad Rashee Rice had a really good game because it was a little bit fluky, but Amari Cooper ended up having a massive game. Obviously, that crazy touchdown from Flacco to end up winning the game and, surviving the Hail Mary that Darnell Mooney dropped somehow, even though it was like right in his breadbasket. So Rashee Rice, that's been good. And then again on the Sunday Live, someone had asked Tony Pollard, Jaden Reed, and James Cook, and I ended up going with Jaden Reed and James Cook. And then just Joe Flacco and the Browns. I kind of said it jokingly on Fantasy Football Advice Network on their Friday show that I was invited to a couple weeks ago, that, if the Browns get really behind the veteran leadership and presence of Joe Flacco and the defense really gets rolling, they potentially could make the playoffs and make a little bit of noise. Now, I'm not saying, I had said jokingly, they're going to the Super Bowl. I really think that they could win a playoff game. They might fuck around and ruin somebody's day. Maybe I think, in like a crazy world could go to the AFC Championship. I don't see them actually legitimately making a Super Bowl run, but I have a couple best ball playoff bets on them just in case. And then we get into, hey, it's my favorite segment of the week. Who scored more than Kyle Pitts this week?
Who in the blue hell are you?
So 3 for 37. That's all we got to beat this week. And boy, did we have a lot of tight ends that participated in embarrassing Kyle Pitts, the way that Arthur Smith and the Falcons were embarrassed when they lost 9-7 to the worst team in football. Hunter Hurst Henry was spitting water in the air. Isaiah Likely was the likely hero that came to town. Tucker Kraft, who I have had on my waiver show and have touted as a potential Mark Andrews if you ordered him from Wish, playing for the Green Bay Packers. Elijah Higgins. Who the fuck is Elijah Higgins? Even I've never heard that name before. He's a tight end for the Arizona Cardinals. Michael Mayer, Cole Kmet, Jawan Johnson, Jake Ferguson, Gigantor, Mo Alley Cox, Tanner Hudson, Dalton Schultz, Gerald Everett, Jonnu Smith, Jimmy fucking Graham in the year of 2023, Tyler Higbee, Keefe. What is this guy? He's Keefe. We got fucking Keefe and Durham Smythe, who sounds like a fucking private eye, managed 4 for 42 and outscored Kyle Pitts this week. And that will bring us right into the Hearts and Farts. So, today is a day of mourning, and before we mourn the teams that did not make it, we will celebrate the teams that did. I'm sure there's a couple of you out there braggadocious, laughing about how you're coasting into your fantasy semifinals. And if that's true, it's probably because you started Jared Goff, Baker Mayfield, Brock Purdy, hell, Aiden O'Connell, Gardner Minshew, Joe Flacco. They were viable starts. Derek Carr, Easton Stick. The stick man somehow put up 3 touchdowns in pure garbage time. Can't really count on that. Jake Browning telling the Vikings, how dare you fucking cut me? Matt Stafford, Lamar, Nick Mullins all managed like a little over 20 points. Even Mahomes, Jordan Love, Russ, T-Law in a loss, and Josh Allen all hovering right around that 20-point mark. Maybe it wasn't the greatest, but they sure didn't kill your week. On the running back side, holy fucking Christian McCaffrey. Christian McCaffrey to me is the MVP of the league. Like, I don't want to hear this noise about Brock Purdy. I think it's silly. Brock Purdy's having a great season, but if you're going to give it to Brock Purdy, just rename the fucking thing Most Valuable Quarterback Award, because he is not the most valuable player on that team. If we saw it, obviously, even when they were missing just Deebo Samuel, that they lost 3 games in a row. If you took, I mean, every team, like, but let's just say, like, not even took him away. Replace him with auxiliary level players like a Zach Moss, like a fucking Isaiah Hodgins, like a fucking any other jabroni in the league that you want to name that isn't like a stud all pro at his level, like Deebo, Kittle, CMC, and Ayuk. That's one of the best offenses in the entire league. And CMC really is the engine that runs the Shanahan run game and offense and just the whole thing in general, the way he is able to be so effective on the ground and in the air. To me, he's the MVP. Fantasy MVP and real MVP. And holy fuck, James Cook. James Cook put up like 40 points. He had a massive day. They just honestly were monsters. If you had to face CMC or James Cook, you know, I honestly, hey, in the comments, go and let us know, you know, if you're able to drop a photo even. If you're smarter than me with the tech shit, go do that. Let us see the teams that beat CMC or James Cook, because that's what I want to see. You would have had to have some kind of combination of Kyron Williams, Ty Chandler, Jahmyr Gibbs, Devin Singletary, Rashad White, CEH coming all the way back from the dead. Remember when CEH was being drafted ahead of Jonathan Taylor once upon a time? Now suddenly it's like, again, Dynasty's so weird where it's like you lost that bet for 3.5 years and now finally CEH is a little bit more relevant to Jonathan Taylor for right now in this playoff window. James Conner, Raheem the Dream Mostert with 20 fucking touchdowns, a Dolphins record. Shout out to him. It's like the first year he's ever stayed healthy, and he's got 20 touchdowns. Not super counting on him to repeat it next year, but it's a credit to his career, and I think it's just a great thing for him as a human being. Zamir White, Amari DeMarcado, Jerick McKinnon somehow threw a touchdown and caught a touchdown. And then just like pure volume plays, Alvin Kamara and Chuba Hubbard were still decent. In the wide receiver room, Jalen Waddle had a smash day. Jordan Addison also had a great day, but it was mostly on people's bench, unfortunately, because he hadn't done anything for the 5 weeks prior. Cooper Kupp. Remember when Cooper Kupp, people were acting like Cooper Kupp was dead in the water, and all of a sudden now he's back to being Cooper Kupp. Scary Terry McLaurin. That one was really funny because he was having like kind of a midday with Sam Howell. All of a sudden Jacoby Brissett comes in and he turns into a fucking Super Saiyan and has a monster day. Chris Godwin also, speaking of, he didn't do any, he's done nothing like the whole season, has his best day of the year by far and away. Honestly, if you benched him, like I wouldn't have even blamed you. Amari Cooper had a good day. Josh Palmer throwing it back to Thursday. He got it done in garbage time. Sun God doth shineth too brightly. Amon-Ra St. Brown continues to be one of the best receivers in the NFL. Again, throwing back to Thursday, Devontae Adams. And then you had guys like Rashee Rice. Noah Brown had a big day. Debo, T. Higgins, Trey Tucker, CeeDee Lamb. Jamal Agnew even caught a long one. Jacoby Myers had a couple touchdowns. Jaden Reed. Deontay Johnson. Mike Evans having I think an exclamation point on, to me, what is obviously a Hall of Fame career. If you've never had less than 1,000 receiving yards in a season, you have a Super Bowl. and you're doing it with, quarterbacks like Baker Mayfield and others besides when it was Tom Brady, like, yeah, to me, you are first ballot, even Hall of Famer. I mean, imagine he retires having not had 1,000-yard season. Like, what are we talking about here? And then Justin Jefferson also, just to say his name, kind of was able to finally play through and back from the injuries that have plagued his season, had 7 for 84. So it was obviously better in PPR than in standard, but it was a decent floor. For tight end, Sam Laporta, making his case as the number 1 tight end in football, let alone dynasty. He might be the number 1 drafted in redraft next year. We'll see how things shake out for the rest of the year with Travis Kelce, and if Mark Andrews is able to work his way back from injury, because he had a broken fibula or something, like, and kind of intense, it sounded like. David Njoku, holy shit, David Njoku. I saw something on Twitter that, like, ever since David Njoku burned his face by accident, that he's been like a tight end 1. He's just having absolutely monster days. He was the number 2 tight end on the week. Trey McBride also, just the tight end landscape definitely feels like it's finally opening up to some good young talent that we can look forward to in the future. When you have guys like Sam Laporta, Trey McBride, even Dalton Kincaid, and even to a lesser degree, like Michael Mayer is sneaky having a fine tight end season for a rookie, and will get better with time. So there's a lot of good, decent young tight ends in the league, it feels like. Hunter Henry, we mentioned earlier. Now keep an eye on him, because it seemed like he was forced to leave the game with a pretty rough leg injury, so he might not be available. But suddenly he was relevant for 2 weeks at the beginning of the season, irrelevant for the entire middle. Now he's been relevant for the last 2. So obviously, if he's trending to play and ends up playing and you try to play him, feels like he's definitely going to have a dud week. So maybe try and look away from that. Isaiah Likely, it's funny because I think people were definitely hesitant this time around on Isaiah Likely just taking over the job completely, because he had that 1 dud when replacing Mark Andrews previously, but he's actually been pretty good. And then Tucker Kraft, my boy, Kraft Dinner, still getting it done. He got another touchdown. He's averaging like 4 for 60 right now, which is decent from a tight end as like a safe floor. And they are having now even more injuries at the wide receiver position, which we can talk about a little later again. But just, a reminder that he could see even more work down the stretch. And then hovering right around that 10-point threshold, which is, safe for tight ends. You had Cole Kmet, TJ Hawkinson, Fergalicious, Jake Ferguson, and Dalton Schultz. And then on defense, because we like to talk about the defenses here too, your best defensive streamers of the week, the Raiders and the Dolphins, kick the shit out of the Jets. The Jets have been one of my favorites to stream against for defense. So if you had Dolphins stash for that matchup, it worked out swimmingly. They shut them out and just destroyed them. And then the Bears and Browns in that kind of crazy game. The Bears defense has been much better as of late. So that's a matchup that you were definitely streaming against earlier in the year that you need to adjust your expectations when you're playing people against the Bears now, because the defense has been much better. But the Browns defense has been good all year. So both of them were viable. The Saints really took advantage of the Panthers, beat them up a little bit. It was the Giants they were playing. What am I talking about? Falcons played the Panthers. Saints played the Giants, and the Giants gave up 7 sacks. I love my guy Tommy Cutlets. Hey, I'm on waivers over here. But yeah, the problem with the Giants is they give up way too many sacks. That's been like the story on them. Tommy DeVito is going to overtake Sam Howell for most sacked quarterback, and he hasn't even started the whole season. So that should tell you how bad it's been for the Giants O-line. And then the Colts. Colts continue to play the turnover game and get those touchdowns. So they've actually been, and shout out to at FF Mad Scientist, Aaron St. Denis. He had mentioned the Colts as a potential streamer for the rest of the season, and I kind of balked at it because they give up a ton of yardage, but at the same time, it doesn't matter because they get those high value defensive touchdown turnovers, and they get high value turnovers in general. So they've been a good streamer and probably will continue to be. And then we get into the farts.
Just hit the pillow. See how you feel.
There's your fucking pillow.
Feel better?
Yeah, I do.
Man, there were so many disappointments and high-level disappointments this week. This is where we are really going to lament. Hey, if you guys got some horror stories, go drop them in the comments. I would love to read them on the show. But hey, let's start with the quarterback farts of the week. Kyler Murray, just kind of barely, little squeaker, 18 points, wasn't great. Tua, 30-0. You would think Tua would have been a great fantasy start. Nope, 16 points. Again, a little bit of a squeaker, not that bad. Justin Fields, again, 15 points. Disappointing, but not an absolute earth-shattering fart. Sam Howell got benched for Jacoby Brissett and still put up more points than Dak Prescott. That was the one that really ruined people. Dak Prescott carried you all the way through the season just to let you down when it mattered the most.
Go fuck yourself.
Man, that one was heartbreaking. I mean, you could also count guys like there were lots of people trying super flex stuff, getting cute with the Desmond Ritters and the Tommy DeVitos and the Zach Wilsons of the world. And yes, I do personally know someone who had to start Zach Wilson in a Superflex Dynasty League. It did in fact happen, and that was obviously terrible. They knew it was probably going to be terrible before it happened. So, just kind of, it's not like they were expecting anything big. I think they were bracing and hoping for, 15 fantasy points, and they ended up getting negative fantasy points. So it was atrocious. For the running backs, Zach Moss continues to let people down. And, I think the early season success really got to people's heads, and they've been kind of just playing him blind. He is still very much matchup dependent. I would just be a little bit concerned. Plus now he's injured, so that might take that decision away from you. Keaton Mitchell had a terrible, terrible injury. Very unfortunate for him. Torn ACL. The Ravens backfield, people talk about it's cursed. I mean, it continues to definitely be an injury riddled and beleaguered unit for sure. So very unfortunate for the Keaton Mitchell, just from like a human perspective, obviously for his potential career and his prospects going forward, but also just, for the Ravens as well. They'll probably turn back to Gus Bus and Justice Hill, combination thereof, but we'll talk about Gus Bus again a little bit later when we get to early waivers. I mean, Najee fucking Harris, he has brought me an insurmountable amount of pain this year. Aaron Jones, David Montgomery honestly didn't really do that well because he didn't get into the end zone. Travis Etienne had a bit of a dud. Zeke, Achane, Devon Achane wasn't there this week. If you tried to go for the home run, you ended up hitting the floor. And it was one of the first times that we really saw the floor, even on limited touches, because he's just been so explosive when he has played and been available. But this was really, I feel like, his first true dud game that wasn't injury related. And then really, these were the guys that killed you because they were all under 10 fantasy points. And there are some big names on this list. Tony Pollard, Antonio Gibson, Austin Eckler, Jerome Ford and Kareem Hunt, Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, Javonte Williams, Miles Sanders. Underrated how disappointing of a season Miles Sanders has had. For me, he's my fantasy bust of the year. He was like a pretty high draft pick, like 5th, 6th round for a lot of people. Hasn't done fuck all the entire year. Get rid of him. Breece Hall, Bears running backs, Dameon Pierce, and then Revenge of the Smith. Nobody lets you down like Bijan Robinson. Fuck you, Arthur Smith. Oh my God. This man had a plan. This man played the long con, fucking multiple weeks of just like actual fantasy dominance and relevancy just to wait for the first week of the fantasy playoffs and be like, I'm gonna let Bijan get a fumble off a bad play call that I make, and then I'm gonna bench his ass. Oh my fuck. Is he not the most frustrating head coach in the history of fantasy football? Like, you know, I'm sure there's been worse coaches in the NFL that have lost more games, but my God, it's like he goes out of his way to just fuck with us in terms of fantasy. And it wasn't just Bijan. It's like you have generational talent at the running back, wide receiver, and tight end position, and you are somehow dog fucking them all. It is honestly astonishing and borderline impressive.
Shots, explosives.
For the wide receivers, Jamar Chase unfortunately ran into an injury. Puka Nacua only 5 for 50. DJ Moore didn't really get it done. Calvin Ridley, that was a fucking touchdown. Referees are the only thing that have been more frustrating in football than Arthur fucking Smith. So I mean, I don't even know what to make of that. It goes all the way back. Like, we still talk about it. Dez Bryant was a catch, and to me, it was. I don't give a shit. And you know, he said himself, like, people still come up to him to this day and they're like, yeah, it was a catch. They don't even have to say like, oh, just, oh, hey, Dez, nice to see you, nice to meet you. It was a catch. But yeah, no, Calvin Ridley, it was a catch. Stephon Diggs, Adam Thielen, George Pickens, Brandon Ayuk, just kind of the way it broke, unfortunately. He almost caught a couple long ones, but it just didn't work out and it ended up going elsewhere. Rashid Shaheed was a popular play when Chris Olave was deemed out, and it just didn't work out. Romeo Dobbs didn't really work out. Garrett Wilson let you down. Josh Downs, Drake London, Goose Davis, DeAndre Hopkins. This one actually legitimately surprised me, I think, more than all of them combined. I thought for sure DeAndre Hopkins was going to have a smash return against his former team. And I think DeMeco Ryans is just really coaching up this defense, and the Houston Texans defense is like better than people think, and they're playing better than people think right now. Elijah Moore, Brandon Cooks, and then Odell Beckham and Zay Flowers just both really shit the bed in terms of fantasy. For the tight end position, this is like the new thing. If you scored less points than Jimmy Graham in 2023, you were definitely a fart of the week. And holy shit, where there's some big farts for the tight ends. Travis Kelce, Darren Waller in his return game, so that one you can maybe forgive a little bit. And then George Kittle. This is what Kittle does. He disappears, and then he shows up. You never know when it's going to happen. You can't count on it in any kind of consistent fashion. You got to take the boom weeks with the bad weeks. And if you were relying on the boom week this week to get you through the playoffs, you unfortunately are probably watching from the sidelines. Evan Ingram also just kind of disappeared in this one. Kyle Pitts, I mean, he's been on this list damn near the entire year. The Muth, Pat Freiermuth, also a bad game. And then Taysom Hill finally turned into a pumpkin. Didn't really do anything for people who were looking for the upside from the tight end hack. And then defense, nobody was worse than the Chargers. If you tried to get cute and play the Chargers against Aiden O'Connell, especially if you after you heard Josh Jacobs was out, holy shit, did that not work out. They scored negative points. I think the only defense that was more disappointing than the Chargers because of how good they've been all year, how much they've helped you, carry you probably to your fantasy playoffs if you play in leagues with defense, the Cowboys. Holy shit. I mean, just across the board, Dak, Tony Pollard, Cowboys defense, they all really let you down. The only one who actually did not, and I should have had him, I think I briefly mentioned him on the wide receiver list. Maybe I missed him, but CeeDee Lamb was the only one that survived because he had volume in the passing game and a random rushing touchdown. So yeah, it was just a bad week for the Cowboys. And then Steelers, the Lions win a game 42-17, but somehow the defense only got 5 fantasy points. So that was disappointing. And then the Chiefs also had under 10, even though it was a low scoring game for them as well. And then we'll just get into some quick waivers for week 16. And holy shit, I mean, with so many teams in shambles, there's probably only half of you that even need this information. But hey, it's a mess out here. We're going to try and sweep it up.
And bring your brooms because it's a mess.
So for the quarterback, hey, I'm on waivers over here. Tommy DeVito. But for real this time, Tommy Cutlets coming off a bad game is going to be at Philadelphia. They are ranked 31st against the pass. Now they are going to get sacks. The Philly defense is still going to be a good fantasy play, but the fact that they are almost certainly going to get ahead of the Giants, the fact that it's a divisional matchup, the fact that the Giants know in the back of their minds that they can play spoiler and potentially mess up the Eagles for the number 1 seed, I really think that Tommy DeVito is going to be a viable fantasy streamer in deep superflex leagues. So again, this is assuming you are the Justin Herbert manager. You somehow made it through this week on the back of, a Nick Mullins or Joe Flacco or some other random start that you did. If you're going to be continuing this dangerous streaming game and you're looking for a little bit of potential upside, I think Tommy Cutlets could maybe get it done this week. But for realsies, you're probably going to play it safer than that in your fantasy playoffs if you've made it this far. So I think Derek Carr at the Rams on Thursday, and then Nick Mullins versus Detroit. I actually think Nick Mullins is probably the safest of all of them. If you told me like who's just guaranteed going to get me 15 to 20 fantasy points and not totally fuck me up, I really think it's Nick Mullins. He's got Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, and now the emergence of Ty Chandler. He's got some weapons. The offensive line, kind of working its way through some injuries. I think he's probably like the real base, boring floor play. But hey, for a little bit of Italian spice, hey, stop me over here. For the running backs, Gus Bus, very unfortunate, the Keaton Mitchell injury, but we've seen before Gus Edwards is going to be the goal line back. When it's down to just him and Justice Hill, yeah, they'll work in Justice Hill a little bit, but he's been on that team for 5 fucking years for a reason. He's never really been the starter. It is going to primarily be Gus Bus, toot toot. So I would definitely be targeting him in leagues where he was dropped. CEH is relevant. They're using both of the running backs in lieu of the lack of pass catching options and the struggles that tight ends or that Travis Kelce, has been having. So I think you can target CEH. And then obviously, assuming that Josh Jacobs misses against Zamir White is going to be a priority add off waivers. And then kind of some deeper desperation plays. You have guys like Chase Brown, Trey Sermon, Amari DiMercado, and Chris Rodriguez. But generally speaking, like, you're not really trying to rely on those type of players unless you're really suffering with injuries. At the wide receiver position, we have Noah Brown is going to be taking on Cleveland. It's a tough matchup, but we saw without Nico Collins, without Tank Dell, and without really any other options, Noah Brown, very fantasy relevant. And, you know, he's been relevant even in the past when they've had like a Nico Collins available. So if Nico Collins were to somehow play, like, you know, I would probably play Noah Brown over the next guy on this list, for example, which is Rashid Shaheed. Stay in the flames with that. If Chris Olave is going to miss again because it's a short week on a Thursday, they are going to be playing the Rams. You would expect the Rams, a little more competent of an offense, can maybe push the Saints to have to throw the ball and score more. So I think Rashid Shaheed maybe could have a nice game here. And then Dontavian Wicks is going to be getting the Carolina matchup. The Packers cannot run the fucking ball right now. I mean, whether obviously AJ Dillon's injured now, but even when it's Aaron Jones, like they just can't run the ball. And Carolina normally is a bad defense. That they seem like a good pass defense because teams just run on them. I don't think they're like a great pass defense either. So I do think that there's going to be opportunity, especially if Jaden Reed, keep an eye on him and his injury circumstances. If he is unavailable, Dontavian Wicks is going to be a viable streaming play and a potential bench stash. For the tight end position, it's still Tucker Kraft. It's been Tucker Kraft for like 3 weeks, guys. Come on. If Tucker Kraft is still on your waivers, he absolutely needs to be owned. He is getting like 4 for 60 now. He's getting touchdown looks, red zone work. And then the big thing is, like I mentioned in the previous one with Dontavian Wicks, if Jaden Reed now is also going to miss time, the more pass catchers that are not available, the more it feels like it's going to kind of go through the middle zone option, which is primarily going to be where Tucker Kraft is living and eating and making his money. So I think Tucker Kraft is a viable tight end play basically for the rest of the year. I mean, you look at Hunter Henry is the next guy on this list. You have to monitor Hunter Henry's injury through the entire week. Make sure that he's available to play and then play him and hope that he doesn't fuck you over. I feel like Tucker Kraft is a safer play. Tanner Hudson, tight end for the Bengals, is an extreme floor pickup. Again, if you are super desperate, I mean, if you're in dynasty leagues, maybe some shallower ones, and you need a tight end because of injuries or performance or whatever have you, again, very deep option. Tanner Hudson provides like an extreme floor. I much prefer Tucker Kraft and his potential over those guys. On defense, if your league allows it. So I was looking for a lot of the waiver ads. I kind of like to mix it up. I look in my own leagues usually, and I'll go look in, my Yahoo 10-man. I'll go look in Sleeper in a couple different formats, like in 12 and 14 and Dynasty and Redraft, PPR, non-PPR. I try and mix it, Superflex, non-Superflex, try to mix it up so I can get a good read on who's actually available for waivers and not just, saying guys that are owned on like 70% of teams. So in doing all that, one thing I noticed, Philadelphia Eagles defense has been dropped across the board, and they were, struggling pretty badly in terms of fantasy for a while, and it was very understandable. I'm one of the people that I know for a fact that in a league I dropped Philadelphia Eagles defense. If your league allows it and they're sitting there on waivers tonight, go claim them right now. So in the Yahoo league, if I wanted to, having the player on your bench that has played does not prevent you from dropping that player and picking up another player that has not played. So technically speaking, I could pick up someone from the Eagles or the Seahawks right now. So if Eagles defense is available for a waiver ad, yeah, go do that right now. Because next week they're going to be playing the Giants, who just gave up 7 sacks. even if the Giants score points, they are going to give up a shit ton of sacks. So I would definitely be looking to play Philly next week. And if you cannot get your hands on the Philadelphia Eagles for some reason, then hey, the Washington Commanders are going to be playing the old standby New York Jets, who will probably be turning to Trevor Siemian at this point to start. And then the other one is Indianapolis. They're going to be at Atlanta. I mean, Arthur Smith just loves to not score points, I guess. So you play a defense against him. And also Indianapolis has just been excellent at turning the ball over and creating points off those turnovers. So they are definitely a viable play. And hey, kickers are people too, right? We always like to talk about the kickers. For Cleveland, Dustin Hopkins is going to be at Houston. Defense is definitely toughened up as of late. I think he'll have some opportunities to kick some field goals. On the flip side, you have Kaimi Fairbairn, who returned from injury and may be available on waivers in your league. He will be at home for Houston going up against Cleveland, also a tough defense. So I think he will also have opportunities for field goals. I think they both could be excellent plays this week. And then New Orleans kicker Blake Grupe, on Thursday Thriller to help you through your fantasy semifinals. I still do have, I think, 4 or 5 teams that have made playoffs. I'll be praying myself. I need about 20 points from Scott Fishbowl, very friendly settings from AJ Brown, and I think I will sneak through to the top 250 in the next round. So I'll definitely be rooting hard for the Eagles tonight. Fly, Eagles, fly. And as always, we love to end with a list of Joker. These are my favorite shout outs to all of the fantasy football and football content creators, Twitter accounts, and follows that I have. These are all follows on Twitter. It's a growing list. It'll never end. And I'm sure I'm missing a bunch of great ones. But for now, this is what I got on the list. And, you know, if you made it this far into the show, there were a couple listeners in here. There's at least one still watching. There were 7 at one point, which is like record. Hey, again, we're very early in our journey here. And so I super appreciate every single listener, every single fan. Drop us a like. I'll do all the stupid algorithmic shit. And I will catch you guys all on the flip side. Hey, you just made the list.
You just made the list!
You just made the list! Oh my God. You just made the list! Those stupid soccer mom's hair! You just made the list!
Now, she's reporting her neighbor was ex-Catholic by her demand and let her close to talk to. Well, she doesn't know what to do. She says we shop for her for Caldwell. Says she hates me ever since I arrived. Says I'm not allowed to go on her. We got to a beat challenging in court. That I will not be an occupant of an assembly hall in her state. They're there to say that she's having fun. Not with yet this policy. Let's leave her say she's moved in. And that she just, she don't want the challenge. Here we go. She plays with Pittsburgh Steelers. She wants no Bowling Green, Ohio. Let's back up for this. She wants someone else. Here we go.